Are you looking for a fun and unique way to keep your cords organized? Let's stitch out the Kimberbell TACO Cord Keeper. For the TACO Cord Keeper, I have a kit from A1 Vacuum and Sewing in Reno, and it came with everything I need to stitch out this cute little cord keeper except for the thread. I have wash away stabilizer, I have green and tan felt, a brown glitter vinyl, and snaps. So let's start the TACO Cord Keeper. I will come to embroidery and to my USB, and I will choose my taco design and hit set. And I do need to change my hoop size to 4x4, select OK, and it fits right exactly in that hoop. I will select embroidery, and I always like to go to the minus plus needle in case I need to go forward or backward stitches or steps. And so the first thing it's going to do is the placement for the lettuce. For these first few steps, you can use any thread color and bobbin color. However, the first thread that will be seen will be a green thread, and so I have already loaded green into my upper thread as well as my bobbin, since that will need to be changed in a few steps. So I've already gone ahead and done that. So after the placement line, I am going to place the felt. You can tape it or spray it, but I think felt sticks pretty well. And so I will put this in and run the tack down. The next step is to do a trim around the lettuce, and this is a raw edge applique, and so there's no other stitching that will go on the edge. And so I'm going to cut about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch right along the stitching lines. After trimming the felt, the next step is going to be the placement line for the brown glitter for the meat. And it's important to remember to peel off this carrier sheet, this plastic sheet, off of your glitter before placing it down. And this is heat transfer vinyl, so once it's tacked down, we'll lightly press it with an iron. And it's also important that the directions call to, of course, change the top thread to a brown that will match, but to keep the bobbin thread the green color. And that's because when you look at this finished little taco, you can see right here is the back piece that's been folded up around, and you can see that back of the lettuce. And so you'll be able, once the stabilizer is washed away, you'll be able to see the wrong side basically. And so because that's lettuce, for this part, we are going to keep it the green. You can also see that we will be changing the bobbin when we do the cheese and the tomato as well. But right now, the green bobbin is left in, and run the stitching placement for the glitter. The next thing is to place the glitter down. It's meant to be placed over the entire taco, and it will do the same stitching and then will be trimmed. but I'm going to go rogue. I'm going to do several tacos, and I want to save as much of this brown glitter as I can. I do a lot of t-shirts and things with HTV, but I don't use the brown glitter a lot. So I want to try to conserve as much as I can. This is totally optional. It's not what the directions call for, but what I think I'm going to do is place this, and I think I will go ahead and tape it and do these first two. I'll let it tack down, and then I'm going to manually stop my machine and just trim loosely. And then I'll move it to this one, stop my machine manually, and then the last little three I can probably put in a row, and then do the same thing for the bottom. Again, that's a lot of work to save a little bit of glitter, but I want to see how many tacos I can get out of this. All right, so let's do that. I also want to note that, remember, the green thread is still in the bobbin. I'm going to press it after it cuts. It will move to the next, but it will stop. So now I can bring this out. And this is raw edge applique, so when I do trim these, it will be about this, kind of like the lettuce, about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch around the stitching. So I just need to make sure that I'm not too close to an edge. So right now I'm just going to kind of loosely trim. Make sure not to get under your lettuce. And then I'll put it back in and run that next tack down. So I might have gotten a little too close. And then stop it again. I'll stop it right after it cuts. And I'll just work my way around. And I'll put these three, just line this up. This might fit. I know this is a lot of work. So now I'm going to continue and do the same thing at the bottom. So look how much glitter I have left. Again, you can decide if that's something That's worth it to me. I'm going to see how many I can get out of this. So I need to trim, just like I did the lettuce, right around next to the stitching. And it is kind of hard to see because it's dark brown stitching. And then after that, we'll press this to activate the adhesive on the vinyl. Now, normally when you do raw edge applique, you try to do a little bit away from the stitching, kind of like this lettuce, with heat transfer vinyl that is going to be pressed so that the adhesive sticks to, the fabric underneath. It's not quite as imperative, especially if it's super small like this. You can hardly see the stitching. I cut it closer than I would, normally, because I'm going to press it down and it's not going to move. It's not going to come out from the stitching. The reason for raw edge applique to not be cut so close normally, of course, is that you don't want that pulling away from the stitching and having that piece of fabric or felt or whatever it is coming undone from the stitching. But in this case, again, we're going to press it. I'm going to use a pressing cloth and press it for about 10 seconds, and that will adhere this vinyl to the felt, and so there's no worries. I think that looks great. All right, let's do that and we'll go on to our next step. So I'll just take my pressing cloth, which is just an extra piece of muslin, and I am just going to press with my little iron. It fits great in this, even in this little 4x4. I love this iron. And I'll just press it for a few seconds to adhere. So let's look at the directions. So the next directions call for a change of bobbin thread again. So we're going to work on the tomatoes and then the cheese, and it will be the same. So I'm going to change my top thread to red, and I also need a matching bobbin. Again, that's because when this is finished, when you open up the taco, you'll be able to see the back side, and so you want it to look the best it can. So I'm going to do that with the tomatoes. Then I'll change to the yellow for the cheese and do the same thing, put a yellow bobbin in. All right, let's get to that point. Oh my gosh, this is so cute. We are almost done. So the last step is to change to brown thread. Again, it will also have a brown bobbin. And the first step, or the next step, is going to be a placement line for the top shell. Although that's really not needed. It's going to go, right in that center. So this first piece will go over the entire taco and it will tack down. And then I will take the hoop out, flip it over, and I'm going to place the second piece of felt, and it needs to be taped since it's on the bottom of the hoop. And then it will run the final tack down, and then we will trim the little shells. So this is what the finished step looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and take this tape off, and it says to go ahead and trim it along these stitching lines. and then remove it from the hoop, but there's no reason to keep it in the hoop. It's done, and I find it easier to cut, especially when it's a raw edge applique, to cut it when it's out of the hoop. So I'm going to pop it out, and then I'm going to trim up the back and the front, and then we're about finished. Oh my gosh, this is so adorable, and it still has the stabilizer on. So it will fold up like that. So the next step is, in the direction says just to take a Q-tip with water and dissolve around the outside, but there is all this on the back side. And so I think I'm just going to lay mine on a towel and mist it with some water. And I probably will do that a couple of times. I've trimmed a little bit of the threads on the back. Usually when there's wash away stabilizer and you dissolve it, you'll, find some more. So I'll just trim if there's, more thread once that dissolves. But that is so cute. And that will be the inside. And then we're ready to add the snap and it will be done. So I'm going to take the stabilizer off. Look how cute. Okay, let's finish this up. So I'm just going to mist it and then kind of let it sit, and then rub it a little bit. And it comes off pretty easy, but usually the first time, especially if there's a lot like the back of this has, it kind of, once it dries, it's pretty firm. It's, kind of like glue. And so usually I will do this twice. It kind of, I guess, depends really on the project. So it looks like it's all off, but I can tell just by feeling it that it's still a little sticky. And so again, I like to do mine a couple of times. I'm just gonna really wet it the second time. I'm gonna dab it, and then I'm gonna let it dry and see if it's still too stiff, which, maybe for this that might be okay. Oh my gosh, that is so cute. I love it. All right, so I'm going to let that dry and see if I need to mist that one more time. While this is drying, I do also want to note that this is an older project, and so they didn't give exact colors for the thread, and I just, used what I had. I used the Dijon color for the cheese, and I debated between that and another one and decided on the Dijon, but I probably would go lighter next time. Here is the Dijon that I used, and too, it is still a little damp, so it may lighten up once it's dry. I might go something like Buttercup to be a little bit more pronounced next time. And I would have chosen a lighter thread for the tan felt. I had originally pulled camel, and then in their picture I was looking and it looked like it had a darker thread, and so I pulled coffee and it looked like it was going to be perfect, but because this did like a triple stitch around, it's a lot darker than I thought it was going to be, so I probably would go with something lighter. But those are the only two things I'm going to change when I do my next few, but I love it. I think it is adorable. So I'm ready to sew the snaps on, and I did not put more water on than just the first few times that I showed. It's a little bit firm, and I think that's good. It will just stand up and I think that's good. So you can tell it's a little firm, but I can still bend it so it's not, you know, not super stiff. So now I need to take the snap. I had several snaps in my kit, so I am just going to do the sew on kind. This is the front, and so I need to turn it to the back. And again, this is why you can see why they had us change the bobbin to the same color so that it looks, you know, like a taco from behind. So when you close it and you still see that, it just looks like the taco. So make sure that on the wrong side, I'm going to sew my snaps. And I'll just have a male and a female, and I will just put them. I'm going to sew this one on first. I am just using embroidery thread because I'm right here, and I doubled it and put it through the needle and then folded it in half. So I actually have 4 strands, and I'm just going to sew this, whip stitch this little snap on, and then I will fold it and make sure that I have it as lined up as I can before I sew the second one on. All right, so let's get this done. So when I start this, I can fold this in half if I want to get the, you know, a little bit more of the middle than just eyeing it. It looks like it's about right here. And so I know that it needs to go right about this little piece right here. And I think I'm going to sew it so it's pretty close to the top of the shell. Now, I'm going to kind of eye where the center is, and I'm going to put my needle down and up. Of course, I'm not doing any of this through the back. This is all just through the first layer. And that is going to put my knot under my snap so that I can't see that big knot. So once I get that, I'm just going to slide this on, making sure that that piece that snaps into the second piece is facing up. And then I'll kind of just adjust where this goes. And I'm in this little piece right here. So I'm just going to whip stitch. So I'm in through, and now I'll go out around and just come under and whip stitch it again, not going through the back. And I think I'm going to do this probably 3 times. Make sure to keep this even because I've got 4 strands, and so sometimes those loops can get out of control. And so I think I'll do that 2 more times. And now I'm coming up through the center, and I need to get so that I can get to this next opening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down like I've been doing, but instead of coming up through that same little hole, I'm just going to come up through that next hole. Again, not coming through the front. That's important. And then that will just get my thread over to the next hole, and then I'll just whip stitch a couple of, probably 3 times. And then I'll go down again on the outside, come up through that next hole. And then do it one more time, go to the outside, come up to that last hole. See, I have a little loop there because I didn't get it quite straight, so I'm going to try to loosen that and re-tighten. Again, because I have 4 threads, I need to try to keep that. Might have to pull one at a time. There's one. See if I can find that other one. You can see that little loop. There it was. So try to keep those as even as possible. Can't remember if that was my last one, so I'm going to do one more. So now what I'm going to do is I'll come back out to where I've got these 3 that looped this last space on, and I'm going to come again back out like I have been, but go under those little threads that hold that last space on, and then I'm just going to bring it through. Remember, there's a lot. You don't have to do 4. You could use embroidery floss. You could just use 2 and you know, maybe loop it through a few more times because it is a little bit harder to keep these straight. And I'm going to pull all the way through it first just to straighten this thread up. Then I'm going to go back around and kind of under those loops again. Pulling to make sure that they're all even. So I have a small loop, and then I'm just going to put my needle through, pull slow and make a knot, and do that one more time. Well, those fanned out, so make sure I have all 4. Kind of go slow to make sure they're not looping up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in. Again, not to the outside. I'm going to put my needle through that center. And just bring it out. Oops, this one got caught. Give it a little tug, and then I'm going to just kind of pull this felt down and trim. And then when I spread that felt back out, that tail just is inside. So that looks good. So now I'll do the same thing, making sure that I have the snap-on correct and just make sure it's about in the right spot. And I'll do the same thing, and then we'll be done. Oh my gosh, I love this little taco. You can see it just holds a cord. It snaps open. You can throw it in a purse and some luggage. I love it.